Welcome to this week's episode of the Holistic Selling Podcast. My guest on the show today is Mark Stevens. Mark is a seasoned go-to-market executive, strategic advisor, and value-selling pioneer with more than 3 decades of leadership experience in enterprise software. He has held senior leadership positions at industry leaders, including Salesforce, Oracle, and Siebel Systems, where he helped shape modern value-selling practices. Throughout his career, Mark has built and led global teams spanning sales strategy, business value services, pricing, alliances, competitive intelligence, and sales enablement, consistently driving accelerated revenue growth and large deal success. Mark is a recognized thought leader and holder of 2 U.S. patents in strategic selling methodologies, and he has personally influenced billions of dollars in enterprise software revenue. Today, Mark advises B2B software companies on improving win rates, strengthening deal strategy, and building scalable, value-driven go-to-market organizations. So I'm very excited to have Mark on the show today. Mark, welcome.
Thank you very much, Bernard. I'm very excited to be here.
Fantastic. Anything you'd like to add to this introduction?
No, that was great. I think you covered it a lot. I'm excited to be here. I've been really exploring a ton about go-to-market strategy and execution initiatives that are ongoing. I'm working with a startup called the sellersedge.ai. Hopefully we can get into that as part of the discussion. And I'm working with some other entrepreneurs around go-to-market AI marketplaces, outcomes engineering, which I think we're going to talk about, as well as AI-powered go-to-market strategy. So there's a lot going on. Probably couldn't cover it all in just this one podcast, but it's an exciting world out there that we are seeing with the advent of AI.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about all of those topics today. And Mark, your expertise aligns very well with the purpose of holistic selling, which is to help CEOs and leaders in the SaaS B2B world remove the friction and complexity in their organization to improve their sales and customer success performance. Removing friction and complexity is only possible when all layers, processes, and functions are aligned to empower customer-facing teams to deliver extraordinary experiences and outcomes to customers and prospects at every touchpoint. The true north in the company needs to be to maximize the value of every customer interaction. Let's face it, it's not easy to do. You may get the help of an executive coach to help you remove those frictions and internal barriers and optimize your organization for greater success, one customer, one prospect interaction at a time. And Mark, you have worked in an executive capacity in the SaaS B2B world for over 3 decades, and so you have an expert point of view on this. And what I'd like to start with is, in your mind, based on your experience, what is the biggest problem SaaS B2B companies need to address to optimize their success?
I would say the number one problem to solve, challenge to address, would be understanding the value that customers are getting out of their solutions. Having built and led 6 business value teams over the years, it was always about, or largely about, closing the deal. Late stage, we need someone to come in and position the ROI. And then that business case, which was beautiful and convinced executive buyers, got put on the shelf. And then suddenly no one was really thinking about, are the customers really getting value out of the solution that we have just sold them? And this is becoming increasingly important in a world where the entire industry is shifting from subscriptions to consumption models and ultimately to outcomes. So it's vital to have in place the capabilities to optimize that signal of what value customers are getting out of the solutions.
So what do you recommend for companies to do to be able to capture that value?
AI is fundamental to this, but it really just starts with customer case studies. Case studies can be coming from a credible source with quantified CFO level metrics, financial metrics, relevant to the industry, relevant to the persona, competitively differentiating, telling a compelling story of value is sales gold for sellers. And it's vitally important for a number of reasons. First of all, 95% of buyers demand ROI. It's the number one purchase driver. So if you can't position the business value in ROI, you're likely not going to win a deal. It's also the number one driver of analyst placement. Gartner Magic Quadrant relies on reference quality and depth for 70% of the Gartner Magic Quadrant placement. and waiting. And similarly at Forrester, similarly at IDC. But the real kicker here is the fact that AI visibility requires a new level of quantified C-level sponsored case studies. There's this new critical discovery layer, AEO, answer engine optimization, GEO, generative engine optimization. Generic customer case studies become invisible in this world unless you're able to provide a quantified analysis of the impact that you are providing your customers. It makes you citable within AI. And I'll share a few more stats. Recent study by Princeton showed that 40% of citation lives when you're able to present a quantified value case for customers. And similarly, when you look at the adoption of AI to provide a short list for potential buyers, that's happening 70% of the time with AI first. So if you are not able to be cited with AI, you're effectively invisible to your prospective buyers.
Well, these are great insights, great data points. SaaS companies can capture adoption and utilization of their solutions on their platform. So that's one thing. But how do you go about, beyond just adoption and utilization, capture the real signals of delivered value within the customer's business?
Well, this is where it gets interesting, Bernard, because historically, creating a customer case study involved finding a potential customer prospect, reaching out to them, conducting an interview or two, trying to capture information about the problem, the solution, and the impact associated with that. Oftentimes that was done by an individual that may not have as much insight into the actual solution or as much ability to engage with a more executive level audience to talk to the right people and ask the right questions. Today, what this is all moving towards is the creation of a new impact signal or evidence engine, if you will, that is designed to extract information in real time as an ongoing process, meaning understanding data from CRM, gathering insights from Gong, gathering insights from telemetry that your product is providing back to you from how the customers are leveraging the solution and the impact it's having on their organization. All those things need to come together to create this ongoing new evidence signal. So it's no longer a one-off process of trying to capture the value associated with one single event. It's creating that ongoing process to have real-time visibility into customers. And that's what's really driving this notion of outcomes engineering. By having that signal, the executive team can set the outcome of what signals they want to be capturing, identify the owners within their organization to ensure that they're maintaining them or building them, sensing those outcomes, and then being able to learn and course correct along the way. So it's an ongoing process of improvement of customer value realization based on all these new signals that can be brought together with AI.
I very much like this notion of outcomes engineering. 20, 30 years ago, a company like i2 Technologies came up with this notion of a strategic impact assessment as a way to capture realized value within their customers. And they were using that to prove the value delivered to the marketplace. It involved a team that went into a customer to capture the value realized by that customer. And they could only obviously do this for a small subset of their customers. Now, what you're talking about here is different. It's not about sending a team to a customer to capture value. It's capturing value in real time through all the interactions with the customers across multiple systems, is it not?
Well, it starts there. I don't think we'll ever be in a world where we don't want to go and engage with customer executives to really hear their story. But what this evidence engine will provide is the signals to say, these are the best prospects and candidates for building out one of these more robust, powerful stories that will help us close more deals.
So your outcomes engineering system will capture the insights from all those systems to identify the customers that are more likely candidates to demonstrate the value that they've realized through the implementation of your solution.
Absolutely.
I think this is very good. Now, in the context of the conversation with the customer, the data that you capture, you still need to have a customer willing to share the data related to the value they realized. How do you go about getting them to share that evidence?
Well, I'm sure you can appreciate this has been a universal challenge from the beginning of case studies. There's great data, but the customer doesn't necessarily want to share their brand. They don't necessarily want to share their operational metrics. And so that will always be a hurdle. However, I believe it starts with the notion that The folks that are engaging with customers, your sellers, your CSM folks, need to first start asking the question. How good are they at asking the question? How good are they at probing the questions of value? That's the starting point. And that's oftentimes the gap because those questions don't get answered. And so then we start thinking about the world of AI and the ability to listen to these conversations, hear whether in fact those kind of questions are being asked, and then providing feedback to those individuals to say, hey, you only asked one value question, or great job, you asked 10 value questions and you probe to really try to extract the information. You also asked for follow-up if someone didn't necessarily know the information, and oftentimes they wouldn't in that type of a conversation. But it starts there. And then it also gets into AI coaching. Okay, you had that one conversation. Let's try it again. Let's have the AI coach rank you in terms of not only how you're asking the questions against a rubric, but how you're delivering those questions in terms of your sentiment, your pacing, so that the next time you do it, you'll do it better. But that's really the starting point, is to provide a mechanism to ask those questions, identify the real areas of opportunity going forward, feed that back into your evidence engine, identify the best prospects, and take it from there.
Right. So on an everyday basis, enabling and empowering the frontline team members, the account executives, account managers, customer success managers, to have a conversation with the customers about the value they got from the solution that has been deployed. I think also quarterly business reviews, executive business reviews should always have a component around realized value. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
I think it's really important at those moments where the executives can be in the room together to say, okay, so let's take the pulse here. Here's what we've deployed, delivering the value that's aligned with the business case that we used to make sure the business case lives instead of being put on a shelf.
Absolutely. And I think another key opportunity is to translate the telemetry that you may be able to secure from your own platform and how the customers are using it into more quantified business value metrics. So for example, if it's a contact center environment, you may be able to calculate the number of calls that were handled by AI versus a human, or the average call time for an individual. Those are great metrics, but you have to take it a step further and say, okay, what is the financial impact associated with those actions and activities that you can get through the telemetry by just looking at simple, ratios of cost per call as an example, to help illuminate to the customer the dollar hard benefits that you're providing them.
That's very well said. And you're right. A lot of the software companies can capture that telemetry, the adoption and utilization metrics, but how do you convert those into value is where the real science is. So let's assume we are dealing with a customer, we're capturing value metrics, they agree to release a customer case study to showcase the example of the success they've had with the solution. The notion of a customer case study sitting on one slide, where you have the problem the customer is encountering, the solutions they've deployed, and the benefits they got from that solution. And it comes across as being very dry, very fact-based, and it does not resonate with the audience. So once you've captured the data, what do you see needs to change to make customer case studies resonate better with the audience so you can really trigger a higher sense of engagement from a customer or a prospect?
So that's a great question. And this is where AI really can't help us all that much, because we're all humans and we're selling to humans. And this is where storytelling becomes of paramount importance. I did a little research on storytelling, and I thought maybe the best place to start with storytelling best practices would be to think about the movie industry. Think about Pixar, for example. They're probably the best storytellers on the planet. They've won 18 Academy Awards with their storytelling. And they've actually documented some of the best practices that they say what leads to a great story. It's things like having universal appeal. It's things like having a clear structure and purpose to what you're trying to accomplish. Great stories have an underdog, somebody to root for. They appeal to our deepest emotions, and it's got to have a visceral sort of impact in terms of the listener in order for it to really resonate with them as humans. It's important to keep it simple and focused as well. So things like structure, the emotion that you're trying to put forth, to make it really resonate. And the simplicity that you're putting forth are all key best practices to think about.
Yeah, and I think the software industry still has a lot to learn from, as you pointed out, the movie industry. The movie industry has it down to a science. They come up with a structure around the script that gets the audience to engage. And very often it's around character development. You identify yourself with the characters, you want to know what's happening to the characters, and you stay engaged in the movie because you truly want to see what's happening to them. And I think we're missing the point, or until now, we've missed the point in the software industry to truly turn customer case studies into great storytelling exercises and then train the customer facing employees in storytelling techniques so that they can be more compelling in sharing those very important customer case studies with an audience in order to attract them to the brand, in order to engage with them. So fine, we have customer case studies. How do we transform them into storytelling exercises? And how do we train the customer facing team members to do that? Any thoughts, any insights on that?
Yeah, a few thoughts. Well, first of all, thinking back to the underdog. Who is the underdog in the world of software? Oftentimes, the underdog is an employee. Going back to the customer care concept, think of an individual who's on the other line with an angry customer and they're demanding answers to questions, and the agent is having difficulty giving those answers back. That's somebody in an underdog kind of scenario and situation. So making it real as a human as to what they're going through, and then translating how your solution changed their world with this guide and advisor that takes them to a different place and helps them in their lives. That's an example of kind of the character arc that is so important in filmmaking and screenwriting. Just as an aside, in addition to music, my other key passion outside of go-to-market strategy and execution is screenwriting. I just finished my first screenplay, and I leveraged AI as coach along the way. So every time I had a draft, I would submit to AI, how am I doing in terms of plot progression, character development, genre definition? And I asked it to score me. And each and every time, it's really clear the importance of every character in the screenplay has to have a character arc. And you have to be able to see that arc as they progress from one stage to another. And that analogy fits as well to case studies. You have to have an individual with a character arc. That could be an employee. That could also be a customer pain that's being experienced, or the opportunities that they're not able to gather, and how your solution impacts that, I think is critically important. And as part of that, acting as humans and getting to the core of their emotions, it's very important to start with the why. Steve Jobs famously said, don't sell products, sell dreams. And what he's getting at here is to start with a different part of the brain, the limbic brain, which relates to feelings and trust and loyalty, memories, as opposed to the neocortex part of your brain, which is more of the cognition, planning, logic element of your brain. Obviously, both are important. But if you can hone the case study to start with the why, then get into the what, then get into the how, I think that's a key element of successful case study development. And in terms of not just the structure of how you start with the why, the what, and the how, it's important to have a good flow that's logical and simple. Perhaps from a simplicity perspective, my very favorite rule to apply is the rule of three. And I try to do this in every communication I have. If there's 4 things, try to make it 3. And the reason is that this is how humans absorb information, which is why we remember things like ready, aim, fire, mind, body, spirit, go, fight, win, location, location, location. All of these things are representative of the rule of 3. And the more you can simplify your communications in that vein, the more impactful you will be heard.
I love what you said about stories that being told by humans to humans. And they have to invoke human emotions to be able to create that connection, that engagement.
Yes.
And clearly, people make decisions based on emotions and then justify those decisions based on logic, but emotions come first. And so I think there's still a lot of art and science that we can inject in the SaaS B2B world. And any one of you who are listening to the podcast in a role of go-to-market, product marketing, sales enablement, revenue generation, I think there's a lot that we can learn in the screenwriting process, in the movie industry. to build stories that are really resonating with the audience, told by human to generate that level of emotion. I really appreciate what you said about leveraging AI to really test whether your story will resonate. So I would assume that today you can basically build a customer case study and share it with an AI engine and ask of that AI engine, will this story resonate? Will this story create the right level of emotion for my audience? And AI could guide you towards saying, no, your characters are not developed enough, or the character arc isn't compelling enough. So I thought that was a very good insight.
Well, I appreciate that. And just a little plug here. I have actually created a storytelling customer case study analysis framework that looks across a bunch of dimensions: credibility, the solution story, quantified outcomes, industry relevance, leveraging AI. I've created a thing in Perplexity where I can take any company name, enter it into the framework, and get a very detailed assessment across all those dimensions for your top 5 most prominent case studies, as well as how you stack up against your top 3 competitors. So if anybody is interested in me running that analysis for you, just simply reach out at mark@win-lab.ai.
Very cool. That's awesome. Great work on that side to really push the envelope around customer success stories and storytelling. Now, let's expand this conversation around the use of AI in go-to-market. There's a huge amount of investment right now in leveraging AI to improve the efficiency of go-to-market engines and go-to-market processes. The role ultimately of a successful go-to-market is to engineer every conversation with every prospect and customers at the moment of truth to get that customer and prospect to further engage with the company and continue to drive that sales cycle, that customer relationship through the entire customer life cycle. So what have you seen in terms of impact of AI in go-to-market that we should talk about today?
Sure. So when you think about go-to-market, oftentimes companies and CROs think of this in terms of discrete functions. I've got my sales consulting organization. I've got my sales enablement. I've got my business value services team. I've got my alliances, my channels as discrete functions. In reality, those are all working together into a process flow, if you will. So identifying the right customer profile and having the right pipeline coverage for that profile, driving commercial execution against that with the appropriate messaging, following that through to the overall value realization of customer impact and the like, just as one small example. In addition, you've got all of these systems stack of disparate capabilities around here's my CRM, and here's my forecasting engine, here's my listening engine. Those stacks of capabilities don't always talk to each other. So having that, I think AI has a tremendous opportunity to not only drive greater process execution across different functions, but also execution across these disparate systems. And to me, the top 3 examples are around messaging, CRO visibility, and again, just around process flow execution based on what you're trying to accomplish within the team.
Well said. You and I think alike in terms of the fact that go-to-market resides across a number of discrete functions. And it's not easy to get all those functions to be aligned and synchronized towards a common true north, a common purpose. And the purpose has to be, how do we engineer the process backwards from that interaction with the customer and the prospect? And how do we make sure that that interaction leads to progressing the relationship in the right direction? 2 dimensions you talked about. How do we align the functions and how do we align the systems to be able to bring all that information into an interaction that we can engineer at the moment of truth for the seller, for the customer-facing employee. What have you seen that works best in being able to make this happen in the marketplace today?
Well, I think there's 2 things. The first one is around messaging and having the very best possible conversation you can have with an individual or persona at any time. In a prior role, we created this messaging engine. It was an automated tool to allow sales reps to select an industry, enter the revenue of the company that they were targeting, and get back an industry-specific first call deck. And we were very proud of that, and it was a hit within the field. But today, that's totally different. Now we're talking about messaging relating to individual company, to an individual persona within that company, which is really why I'm very excited about the Seller's Edge AI. That's precisely what it's focused on. It's helping sellers understand their accounts in a very real-time, rapid fashion, and then building the assets to have amazing conversations every time. That's just part of the process flow, however. Once you have that conversation, there has to be a feedback mechanism in terms of how well that conversation went, which is where the AI coaching comes into play. Understanding not only the delivery against the messages that you want those sellers to convey, but also how they told that message. How many times did they say, what was their emotion as they were going through that conversation? Were they talking too fast or talking too slow? All of that is empowering with the AI coaching concept. And how do they stack up against their industry or their company peers, their other sellers in the organization? It's interesting how enablement has changed, by the way. It used to be around certification. It's a one and done process. You might do a pitch to your boss, and your boss then had to spend hours and hours listening to the pitch of everybody. And then they would check the box and say, okay, you're certified to talk about this. When in reality, you may not be certified to talk about a particular topic. This is where the AI coaching becomes so critical. The idea of enablement is moving away from a one and done scenario to think of it as a sports metaphor. If you're on a team, you're practicing all the time before you get in the game. And that's where enablement is moving towards ongoing practice, ongoing enhancement, so that when you get in the game, you're playing your best game.
Very profound. Because traditionally, what we've done, as you pointed out, is we do sales enablement sessions, we do training, we do role play, we do sales kickoffs. We certify people, and we think that you went to the gym one time that made you an athlete, and we know that's not the case. The ongoing, consistent reinforcement of a skill set, of a tool, is what makes you an athlete in the field. And so what AI really enables, as you pointed out, is that constant coaching and reinforcement of the best practices, one sales call at a time, and the coaching that relates to how that sales call went, so that you can continuously improve. Also, the fact that as a salesperson, you don't need to study a bunch of decks in advance. You can basically prompt your go-to-market AI solution, and that go-to-market AI solution, based on the context of the conversation you're going to have, can deliver an entire script for you to use for that conversation at the moment of truth, which will greatly improve the productivity and the velocity of your frontline team members to have those conversations at scale and make those conversations a lot more productive. I think of all the topics that we've been discussing on the podcast for a few months now, that seems to be the one area where I can see the most investment taking place in the industry today. So tell us more about Seller's Edge AI and the solution that they've deployed to enable that outcome.
So Seller's Edge AI has assembled 8 unique agents that are working on behalf of the seller. There's research agent, there's a competitive intelligence agent, there's a business value agent as examples. And it allows a seller to go in and create a case, create a customer, enter that information in, and immediately they get a full breakdown of the customer's challenges, SWOT analysis, all sorts of different types of analysis that then bubbles up into the most salient things to be talking about to not only that company, but also that persona within that company based on the solutions that you offer. So you can enter the solutions that you offer, or you can just simply give your URL and it will find the solutions that you offer. And that's kind of where you get started with the engagement with the solution and then the creation of assets, such as an overall value case around the solution that you're positioning and the persona themselves within the industry that they operate in, as well as the creation of a first call deck, which again is hyper personalized to the context of that individual conversation. And it can change at will depending on who you're talking to at any given time. So it's a pretty exciting use case of how AI is enhancing messaging in the marketplace. But another area I would love to talk about, if we have time, Bernard, is how AI is bringing together these disparate technology stacks within go-to-market. And this is critically important because if you're a CRO, you're obviously interested in the overall aggregate, but you're really interested in the top 10 deals. I need to have my finger and hands into what's going on within these top 10 deals. And we see all the time that there's overconfidence in the deal slips or we are inaccurate in our forecast. AI has a great opportunity to really bring together disparate sources of information to provide a much better view of what's really happening in deals. So as an example, for all your top 10 deals, the CRO could see on one page the weekly activities going on. Is it increasing? Is it going down from your CRM? The number of actual stakeholders who are being engaged with, mapping in MedPIC information about all the key stakeholders and decision makers and who the account team is actually talking to. The sentiment of those conversations, whether it's positive, neutral, or negative, the use of deal rooms. As the reps are sending information to individuals within a deal room, are they actually reading the information? Are they sharing the information? And all these things can come together into an AI-driven risk assessment of the deal. It's a low, medium, high risk opportunity. So therefore, you can take early action to the ones that are at risk. So it's a powerful way to transcend the current stack into meaningful insights for the CRO.
Very well said. And obviously, meaning also that by using that AI system to bring together all the data across all those systems, not only do you help the CRO and the VPs of sales, the frontline managers understand which deals are progressing, but you can also leverage those to increase the quality of the forecasting process. Because we always talk about the forecast should be based on buyer signals. It doesn't matter what we do. What matters is what the buyer or the customer does in the context of a buying cycle. So if we can capture those buyer signals, those buying intents in the dialogue that's taking place, the sentiment, the stakeholders, and we can translate that back into, is the customer engaged? Is the customer willing to move forward? Is the customer telling us the right buying signal? Should that not convert into a better forecasting process?
Right. And it's not just about having a good forecast, which is important. And it's not also having a good understanding of or opportunity to increase hitting your numbers, but it really comes down to understanding who needs help. And so this is a mechanism to focus executive attention and resources around those deals, which are critically important, but are not necessarily moving in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And you talked about AI in a way that is going to be very insightful for our audience today. So thank you for that, Mark. You carry a lot of expertise into this conversation. What I love about the context today is you and I have known each other for the better part of 20 years. And it's very interesting to see the evolution of your expertise from the world of pre-AI, where, as you pointed out, you were developing first call decks and serving those up to a sales rep to use in the context of a conversation. And that was at the time very successful. And now this has been completely transformed with AI, making this a lot more contextual, personalized, one interaction at a time to drive the quality of that interaction going forward. So the transformation has been absolutely enormous in terms of sales enablement, go-to-market, and the ability of sellers and buyers to connect at the moment of truth to make that interaction much more productive. So if I could summarize the conversation today, we started talking about the importance of understanding the value that solutions deliver to customers. You brought this term in the conversation of outcomes engineering and how you can capture outcomes and value now leveraging AI in the context of the information you capture from customers, which is a great insight. How do we then build those into customer case studies, and how critical it is to build customer case studies with quantifiable value? Because not only is it important to be recognized by search engines in the world of AEO and GEO, but it's also important to be recognized by the analyst community as a leader in the field. And so capturing quantifiable value is absolutely critical in this day and age. How to capture that value is a matter of the engagement with the customer. Ask them about the value they realized and make that a part of your relationship with the customer to capture that value. The other topic we talked about is, fine, you have a customer case study, you capture quantifiable value, but how do you then relate that customer case study to a customer to get engagement? We talked about that being the art of storytelling. And I appreciate everything you said about your expertise in storytelling and screenwriting and the relevance of the movie industry and how we need to learn from the movie industry to develop stories that resonate, that trigger emotions in the hearts and minds of the audience. And then finally, the use of AI in every facet of go-to-market. by bringing together discrete functions and discrete systems to enable a much higher degree of productivity in the go-to-market function, the massive investment that's taking place there, and the fact that you can now harmonize all the data from multiple systems across your entire stack to really help the productivity of the process. So I think you have a lot to offer, Mark, to any SaaS B2B company that is looking to improve its go-to-market productivity and sales success and customer success. Anything you'd like to close the conversation with today in terms of your call to action for the audience?
Well, I think you summarized it very well, Bernard. It was really great getting the band back together, so to speak. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and your audience. I love what you are doing with holistic selling. You've created an amazing framework, which I think everyone should adopt to really elevate their game in this new emerging world of AI.
Well, thank you for the vote of confidence there. I would love to continue partnering with you going forward. So, Mark, thank you so much for your insights today.
Absolutely. Thank you.